I hope sometimes you'll find yourself able to come and join us, Don, and just have a couple of good yucks and be a part of this fellowship. We're truly honored to have you. So everybody, just give him a, he's not going to hear you, but clap your hands like you're clapping anyway, and welcome Don. Don L.
Hi, everybody. I'm Don. I'm an alcoholic. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. That'd be great. Thanks. I appreciate that. Marty, thank you for the kind words. Far too many. I don't need any help with that. It's funny the raging battle that goes on in the recovering alcoholic, you know, between his soul and God and his ego. It just never ends, and it's a funny thing. Luckily for me, God has blessed me. The caretakers of my recovery and the caretakers of my ego, God has seen fit to put people in my life that are completely unimpressed with me and are more interested in what I did that day than what I did the day before. And one of them is my beautiful wife, Eileen, and it's her birthday today. And, you know, I had done what I have done 100 times in our 24-year marriage. I made an AA commitment, be completely self-absorbed, not realizing it was my wife's birthday, and realized that a couple of days ago and said, hey, you know that thing where we were going to do that thing? How about we do that this weekend? And she said, why would that be? And I said, I did it again. She goes, where are you speaking? You know, because this isn't new information. And God bless her, you know, she's never been upset. AA comes first in our house, so it's really not a big deal, but completely unimpressed with me. She just smiled and said, well, I'll find out a way for you to make it up to me. And so I'm looking forward to those marching orders when they come in. And I love talking about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. To be honest with you, I don't know what else there is to talk about. We can really get caught up in the minutia that you hear sometimes in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, but the reality is there's a couple of things that we have in common, hopefully, if we're members of Alcoholics Anonymous. On the ailment side, the malady side, the alcoholism side, the one thing that we should all have in common is that physical attribute, that we have the allergic reaction, the phenomenon of craving, where one's too many and 1,000's not enough. Because a lot of our drinking looks different. You know, this guy drank that, she drank this, he drank in the morning, he never drank in the morning, I drank the hard stuff, I drank beer only. And then don't even get me into the outside issues. Then we have the subset to the subset to the subset. You know, and pretty soon the only person I can identify with is a guy that stole a cab at 3 in the morning, threw up in the back seat and got handcuffed in front of the cemetery. I'm sorry, unless that's your story, I can't identify with you. So I have to keep that's one of the things that binds us together, is that common peril. But as our book says, that wouldn't join us together. That's one element in the powerful cement that binds us. But what really holds us together is the common solution that we can absolutely agree upon and join together in brotherly and harmonious action. And so I like talking about the steps. I like talking about the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is where I found myself. You know, interestingly enough, I come to Alcoholics Anonymous September 16th, 1991, which is my sobriety date. I'm 28 years sober. And I got to tell you, I'm shut down. I'm done with the human race. I have surrendered, but not the surrender that people in Alcoholics Anonymous ask you to make. I made the surrender of a desperate man who had done battle with King Alcohol one too many times and ended up on the ground. And if there's one more attempt to get sober and one more failure, and you're stuck in that hamster wheel, maybe what will happen to you is what happened to me. And I lost the will to do battle. And I surrendered to the idea that I was going to die drunk. And for the last couple of years before I made it to AA, I made my life as small and manageable as possible. You know, I quit driving. I stopped I take jobs that, to be honest with you, I think are beneath me, but they don't expect a lot of me. I cut my family out of my life. I cut my friends out of my life. I try to make my life as small and compact. And what I'm doing, you know, and I heard this, and I've said it myself, you know, that due to my alcoholism, my life got very small. And that's not really true. My life didn't get any smaller. It's just that alcoholism wants everything. You know what I mean? Alcoholism will take everything from me that money can buy. It'll take all the outside stuff. And then it'll take everything that money can't buy. love of life, love of family, hope, dreams. It'll take all those things from me. And when it leaves me more dead than alive, when the kind thing to do would be to kill me, then it takes, it doesn't. It goes after my family. And so when alcohol had taken everything from me it possibly could, it's not that my life got smaller. It's alcoholism demands everything. And what I did is I made more and more and more allowances and room for my alcoholism as the years went by. You get rid of the career, you get rid of the friends, you get rid of relationships, you get rid of the family. Everybody gets pushed to the perimeter of my life and eventually off the edge to make more room for that next drink. And the funny thing about my alcoholism, in my case, is everything I do, it seems like plan A. This seems like my idea, like there's no other choice. So I'm a guy that comes to AA absolutely convinced that I'm not going to stay sober, not in a million years. That's not why I came here. I came here to get the heat off, figure out my next move, and I'm in a lot of trouble. And I'm dying from alcoholism, and I know it. And the game is over, and there's no safe direction. So the fact I'm sitting here, sober for 28 years, enjoying the best life I've ever known, surrounded by the best people I've ever known, with legitimately no big deals. I'm blessed. I'm overpaid, and I didn't see it coming. And if there's somebody listening tonight that's early in recovery, I want to tell you the best news of all about Alcoholics Anonymous. AA does not work because of the alcoholic. Isn't that something? So if you think you got to be a certain way, a certain strength, I got to be intellectually sophisticated, I got to be bigger, smarter, faster, stronger than the next guy. It ain't about that, because AA doesn't work because of the alcoholic. It works in spite of the alcoholic. In spite of what I brought to AA, all my prejudice, my old ideas, my concrete thinking that I would never be able to get sober, this victimization that was tattooed into my very being, AA overcame all of it. And so whatever you bring to the game of recovery, bring it all. As ugly as it might be, as wrong as it might be, doesn't matter. If you give yourself to the program, Alcoholics Anonymous will overcome all of that. And it's through the process of these steps that at first my mind was changed, and then eventually my soul was changed. My very being, my reaction to life, the core matter of my being is not the same as when I came here. I don't feel about life the way I felt about life when I got here. And that needed to happen for a guy like me. And by the time we've gotten through all the steps, hopefully some big stuff has happened. And by the time we're into the 9th step, and I want to talk briefly about timeline, because we talk a lot about timeline in Alcoholics Anonymous with the steps. How soon should I do them? How fast is too fast? How slow is too slow? Here's the deal. Fearless and thorough from the very start. I'm going to offer you something for thought that I think will ring true with you. It's always rang true with me. You don't need a sponsor or anybody else in the program to tell you if you're trying. That is one of the most accurate things that we can assess on our own. I know when I'm making an honest effort in my recovery. I don't need to go ask my sponsor. I don't need to talk to my AA buddies or anyone in my home group. Listen, I know when I'm trying. And I think that if you show up in your recovery, you make an honest effort on a daily basis, you're going to be okay. The timeline for the steps is fearless and thorough from the very start. And it's different for some of us. Some of us go through very, very quickly. I did, comparatively speaking, to some stories I hear. And then other people, not so much. But I think it depends on what you've got bringing to the game. But I'll tell you this. I got a sponsor my second night in Alcoholics Anonymous. And from that point onward, there were no days off. You know what I mean? Because the clock was ticking. And we're in a race. And the race is always the same, man. It's between my recovery and my disease. And who's going to win that race is really going to depend on who stays focused. And my sponsor used to say, where the steps were concerned, hurry, hurry, lest the test comes early. There will come a time in every alcoholic's life where we will have no effective mental defense against the first drink. And when that time comes, you better have that relationship with your higher power on lockdown. So we understood that the clock was ticking, that before I got through the steps and had a psychic change, had that relationship with this power everybody seemed to be talking about, I was on thin ice. And I did what my sponsor told me to do. I got in the middle of the room in Alcoholics Anonymous, and all the good people of AA that had recovery, they all surrounded me. Because the funny thing about AA, you don't have to ask for help. People will see you making an effort, and they will surround you. They will, AA's, you know, we understand if you're new. You, like me, took a long, dangerous walk into some dark, dangerous woods. But here's the deal. We walk in alone, but we walk out with members of Alcoholics Anonymous. AA comes and meets us where we're at. We don't stand at the edge of the woods, clapping our hands, encouraging people. Come on, the good stuff's over here. We go back into the dark and get people. We meet people where they are. And they did that for me. And so by the timeline for me is very quick. I wake up in the morning and I've written my 4-step and I'm ready to share my 5th step that day with my sponsor. I finish that 5th step. I pause for an hour. I do steps 6 and 7. I've got my 8-step list. I made it when I took inventory. That's in the book. My sponsor lines me out that night on the phone with amends number 1. The next day, I am making amends to people face to face. Why I do that and start making amends, my sponsor has me come over, lines me out on steps 10 and 11. I'm already doing 12-step work because I started doing 12-step work in its purest form my first week of sobriety, which is when you go to your sponsor and you complain about how you feel, right? Tell them how bad you feel. I want you to understand how bad I feel. And he goes, you know what? Why don't you stop sucking the life out of the room and go talk to somebody and maybe you can make them feel better. You know, Don, if I thought about myself as much as you think about yourself, I'd go in the backyard and hang myself. And you walk away with your tail between your legs, hating your sponsor. And then you go talk to another alcoholic and you're amazingly set on your feet. And so I've been experiencing the gift of the 12-step long before I formally worked it. But it's so important we get into steps 10 and 11, I think, simultaneously, right? And the book talks about this, and I'll show you the timeline. I want to get into the big book and tell you what it says on page 84. This brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory. We continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commence this way of living. What way of living? Continue to take personal inventory. Continue to set right any new wrongs. That's the way of living. We vigorously commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. That's the timeline. When they say as we clean up the past, we're saying as we do the 9th step, we're going to vigorously commence this way of 10th step living, which is we're going to continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any wrongs as we go along. We've entered the world of the spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Continue to look for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. We discuss them with somebody immediately, and we make amends quickly if we've harmed anyone. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to somebody we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code. So in that short paragraph, they use the word continue 4 different times. It's probably one of the most important words in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, sometimes we see somebody leave this way of life and go back to the grinder and start drinking again. And we all try to explain it, right? Why did they go back to that? Why when they had the gift in place would they renounce that gift and go back to it? And we say, well, maybe they weren't going to enough meetings, maybe they weren't working. We try to explain it away. But isn't it 2 things? Isn't it a fact they didn't continue? And isn't it a simple case of underestimation? We underestimate what we're up against here. We underestimate the idea that there's a reason that we say to each other, it's a 1 day at a time program. That it's so important that I understand I can't stay sober today on yesterday's program. So I'm going to have to continue to do these things. And the wonderful thing about the 10th step is when I work the 10th step, it automatically springs me back into all the other steps without my permission. Because it's important that we understand when we go through the steps initially, a very normal reaction to them is they feel very mechanical. Additionally to that, our approach to working the steps tends to be a little bit on the academic side, which makes sense because that's all we've ever known. That's the way that we study things, with this academic approach. I'm going to study the curriculum. I'm going to understand it. Then I'm going to get a passing grade. Here you got a B+ in Alcoholics Anonymous. You never have to look at this crap again. That's not what we're talking about here. This is not academic. This is not of the mind. This is spiritual. This is of the soul. The application of the steps is to our life. It becomes the way that we work out our solution. Solution to what? My inability to accept life on life's terms. To answer the question, what has always been so distasteful about this thing called life that I have to anesthetize myself just to be on the planet? The steps are going to help me answer that, and they're going to give me a plan of action and direction where my life is concerned. So when I work the 10th step, I'm going to continue to do what I learned in steps 4 and 5. So when I took inventory, I learned a lot of important things. I'm going to look for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. These are the very things I'm looking for in inventory. It says when these crop up, not if they crop up. So there's a promise. Not all the promises in the big book are sweet. So this is a promise that these things are going to continue to show up in my life. And everybody understands that, don't we? You know, how many times have we done it again? We're the do it again people. You know, I can't believe I did it again. I can't believe I said that again. I can't believe I yelled at my wife again. I can't believe I lost my cool again. I can't believe I lied again. We're the do it again people. They're going to crop up. How many times have we decided that we're going to be better? Isn't that fun? Well, I'm going to be better. Today, I'm going to be more honest. Today, I'm going to be calm. Today, and then we go out and do the same thing again. We begin to understand the depth of our powerlessness. This powerlessness that when we're introduced to the concept in step 1, we think to ourselves, that applies to my alcoholism and that other crap. And we take that on board with no argument. But everything else, well, that's up for debate. I'll tell you, when I say I'm powerless at 28 years sober, I mean over everything. Everything. I haven't been able to change a damn thing in my life under my own human power. I've had to have God's help, period. That's my experience. But it takes a while of what? Trial and error, you know, because we don't go easy, man. If we're nothing else, we're stubborn, aren't we? It's like, well, I'm just going to try harder. That doesn't work, but we're going to do it anyway. So when these things crop up, there's a plan of action. When they crop up, I ask God at once to remove them. That's the first thing, right? So I'm back in step 6 and 7 because I'm asking myself, do I really want God in my life? Did I mean what I said in the 3rd step? Have I really turned my will and life over to God? Am I completely ready to have him remove this defective character in this moment in step 6? And 7, and do I have the humility, the understanding about myself that I can't do anything about it? If I could do anything about it, I'd have done it years ago. And yet here I am again in resentment, in fear, in dishonesty, in selfishness, in inconsideration. Whatever it is in that moment that crops up in that 10th step, I've proven to myself again that my human power marshaled by my will fails utterly. So do I have the humility required in the 7th step to say, Dad, I can't do this without you. Please take this away. And so I take this away and I ask God to take it away. So the first thing I do is I ask, and that's the big key word. I ask for that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make amends quickly if I've harmed anybody, right? Because all my life, I break bad and I ask you to carry my luggage. How do I do that? With an explanation, with a story, with a narrative. You know, I think there's 2 different types of wrongs, don't I? You know, there's the wrongs that you do me where I want justice and retribution. And then there's the wrongs that I do you where there's a story. Hey, I'm sorry I did this, but I had a bad day. Hey, I'm sorry I did this, but I wasn't feeling well. Hey, I'm sorry I did this, but I got a lot going on at work. You know, when I treat the other God's kids poorly, automatically I have an explanation or an excuse. And excuses are nothing more than the skin of a lie that are filled with reason after reason after reason. And so I have to stop that. I have to stop asking people to live with my bad behavior. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to make mistakes. It means that I don't spend 2 weeks grinding over it, talking to my sponsor, writing inventory, and then I make amends. When I break bad, I clean it up. And I understand what an amends is today. It's not an apology. It's an understanding, and it's a process. So I have to go through the process with whoever I affected the same way I did in the 9th step. I have to ask if I can talk to them. I have to make an appointment. I have to tell them how I think I harmed them. I have to ask how my behavior affected them and then listen. I have to ask what they think I should do to make it right. And I have to be willing for all these things to occur. And then I have to make it a spiritual piece of business. So what? I have something to bring into prayer and meditation and bring to God in 6 and 7. So hopefully it's not repeated. It's not an apology. It's so much more than that. Amends are my walking orders for the future. So I make amends quickly if I've harmed anybody. I discuss these things with somebody immediately. Doesn't say my sponsor. Doesn't say my spiritual advisor. Now I try to get a hold of my sponsor when I have to do a 10-step, but sometimes it's shocking. He does not sit at home next to a red phone that lights up when I call. Oh, it's Don. Don needs me. Sometimes, without my permission, he has a life of his own, and I can't get a hold of him. What am I supposed to do? Sit with the unresolved conflict? No, I pray for calm, and I call another AA member. And I've got a whole list of guys that I can go to with 10 steps and just say this, hey, man, I got a 10-step to run by you. And the way I run a 10-step by is I will tell somebody what's going on. I will tell them what I came up with, and I'll say, what do you see? And then I really want the answer. I'm convinced that God works through people. Convinced. And I'm also convinced that my self-will will dress up as God's will all the time in my life. And the longer I'm sober, the better my self-will gets at the disguises. You know, a lot of the letters I receive from God, the handwriting looks strikingly familiar. You know what I mean? It's amazing what happens when you talk to another person who doesn't have any skin in the game, right? They have that outside perspective that can tell you where you're missing the boat, show you something, shine a light on something you never would have seen yourself. So I make the amends quickly. I discuss them with somebody immediately, and then I turn. I turn what? Away from me. Because it takes a certain level of self-involvement to do a good 10-step. We only want the amount of self-involvement required, right, to find the information there and to take the spiritual action. Make the amends, ask God to remove it, make sure you're not missing anything by talking to somebody, and then we turn away from that. We turn our thoughts to somebody we can help. These directions come right after the book has said, we've entered the realm of the spirit. And it says the next function, the next thing we're supposed to do is grow in effectiveness and understanding. Effectiveness and understanding of what? Well, I think understanding of what God's will is for us and effectiveness in carrying that out. And if I'm going to become more effective in understanding what God's will is for me and better at carrying that out, I can't kid myself about who I am that day, about my humanness, about my imperfection, about my powerlessness. I have to stop thinking it's some type of a competition where I get a good grade or a bad grade. And I have to just allow myself to be human and go to the power, go to the light, and ask for help, and be willing to grow in whatever that turns out to be. You know, I'll tell you a couple of quick little things about the 10-step, like what does a 10-step look like in my life? Because this is all, you know, book information, it's good, but what does it look like in your life, dummy? You know, it would be the question I would ask myself. My favorite 10-step story, and I'll try to be brief about this. Many years ago, you know, it was my wife, Eileen, and I, it's our first house. And it's a fixer, you know what I mean? Everything's broken on the house. So I'm constantly working on the house, and it's a Saturday, and what's on tap that day is I'm going to work on this garage project. I'm going to sheet the inside of the garage with plywood. And the night before, I'd gone to the home center and bought all the plywood. And while I was there, I noticed in the hammer section, man, I could see the hammers all lined up. And there was one that caught my eye. I mean, it was almost singing to me from a distance. So I went over to this hammer and I picked it up, and it's a 24-ounce Vaughan framing hammer. And just holding it in my hand, I immediately could picture myself swinging and sinking nails and how cool I would look. I mean, there was no way I'm not buying that hammer. So I buy the hammer. I can't wait for morning. The next morning, my wife and I are in the garage. He's doing something. I'm hanging plywood. Music's going. Beautiful Southern California day. We're young and in love, and it's not a cloud in the sky. And I'm swinging this hammer, and I'm sinking these 8-penny nails. And I'm thinking to myself, my ego saying, damn, I'm good. Ba-bam. Damn, I'm good. Ba-bam. And this goes on for quite some time. And probably about a half an hour into setting plywood in the garage, I mishit this nail. And my hammerhead, this brand new Vaughan 24-inch hammer, bounces off the nail and hits this thumb dead center, full force. And my thumb just explodes, shoots a rooster tail of blood on the new plywood. And I do what I've been taught to do in my entire life when you blow up your thumb with a 24-ounce Vaughan framing hammer. I start yelling and screaming and cursing with the most profane language. I'm making up obscenities as I go. I spin in a 360-degree circle, and I kick everything in that perimeter as hard as I possibly can. I do this for about 30 seconds. And then I stop, and I get some duct tape, and I wrap my thumb up, and I go back to work. And I noticed there was a change in the environment. A cold front had moved in. And that warm and sunny and loving garage that my wife and I were working at is suddenly changed into a dismal, cold, rainy spot. And I look over at my wife, and she's got that look on her face I've seen a million times, like she just ate a lemon. And I said something very spiritual to her, like, what? And she goes, And I go, what? And she says, look, I've talked to you about this once. I've talked to you about it 100 times. You're 6'5", you're 280 pounds. When you scream and yell like that, it scares the hell out of me. It terrifies me. But I've talked to you about it. You always do it. So I don't know why I'm wasting my breath. And I drop my new hammer on the floor, and I turn to her and I go, you must be kidding me. Do you not see the rooster tail of blood on the plywood? You know what? You're ridiculous. Why don't you go to the meeting tonight and ask 10 men? I won't even tell you which 10 men. Ask them randomly what they do when they blow their thumb up with a hammer. And if they're a real man, they'll tell you the truth, that they cuss and they kick stuff. You know what? You don't want a man. You want a little boy. You want somebody you can push around. That's your problem. You want too much from everything. You want to be the queen of the universe. And I'm going deeper and deeper. And I storm out of the garage. And now I'm in my office arguing with my wife, who's still out in the garage. You know, I don't know how I ended up with you. Why I married you. You're unreasonable. And I'm really upset. And somewhere in the back of my voice, this little voice pokes up that sounds a lot like my sponsor. And it says, it's probably a good time for a 10-step. Let me tell you, you can't do a 10-step in that condition. You're too angry. Never try to do a 10-step when you're angry. You won't be able to do it. It won't be accurate. Oh, you know, you might be able to pray like, please, God, kill them all, kill them right now. But it won't be effective. The first thing we have to do is calm down. And I know that. So I sit down and I start trying to meditate and take some deep breaths and just calm down. I calm down enough that I'm able to think about what happened. And now I'm running it through the columns, right? Because that's what we do. We go back into inventory, continue to take personal inventory. So I'm going to run it through the columns. What's going on? I'm resentful. Column 1. Who are you resentful at? I'm resentful at my wife. Well, what did she do? Column 2. Well, you know, she's ridiculous. She's ridiculous. She expects too much out of me. It doesn't matter what I do. She's always got something to complain. It's never enough. Oh, I'm yelling and I'm screaming. She doesn't even ask how I'm doing. You know, she's selfish. She's inconsiderate. She's a terrible person. All right. What do you think that affects? Column 3. Well, it affects my security. It affects my confidence. It affects my self-esteem. I'm fairly certain it's going to affect my sex relations. Putting out of my mind the wrongdoings of others, so I push all 3 columns aside. I resolutely look for my own mistakes. Where was I selfish, inconsiderate, dishonest, or afraid? I go into the 4th column. Now, I know we're talking about 10-step, and I'm bringing up the 4th step. What we're doing in the 10-step is what we learned in step 4. So now I go into the 4th column. What did she say? What did she say? She said she's talked to me about this 100 times. Is that true, Don? Well, I don't know if it's 100 times, but she's talked to me about it a lot. Huh. If she's talked to you about it 100 times and you haven't done anything about it, I mean, why is that? Is your wife a liar? Think she's lying? No, man. No, my wife's one of the most honest people I've ever met in my life. She will tell the truth when a lie would suit her better. It makes me crazy sometimes. She just doesn't have to work at it. She's naturally honest. Huh. What did she say? She said I terrify her. Hey, Don, you want to terrify your wife? Oh, no, man. You know, of all the places in the world where she could stand, the place I want her to feel the safest is when she's standing next to me. That's the last thing I want to do. Well, Don, if she never lies and she's talked to you about it 100 times and you don't want to terrify her, why do you keep doing it? I don't know, man. I guess I didn't believe her. I thought she was being dramatic. And in that 10th step, I saw how easily over the years I had came up with a story or an explanation or a narrative about my anger in my marriage, how I could just push those things off where it was still an option on the board with the right circumstance. And then the voice says, what do you think you got to do, Don? I go, man, I got to go make amends. And I went out to talk to my wife and I asked her if I could have a minute of her time to make amends. And she was willing to listen to me, although her feelings were really hurt. And I told her, I said, baby, you've been talking to me about this for years and I haven't believed you. And I know that's a none too subtle form of calling you a liar, and you ain't a liar. And I'm so sorry for that. And I can't promise you I'm never going to lose my temper in front of you again. I can't make that, but I promise you I'll make it a spiritual piece of business and I'm going to bring it to God and I'm going to see what God can do with that. And she goes, that's all I've ever wanted. And so now the sun comes out and everything's wonderful. We're having a lovely day. And you fast forward a couple of hours, the inside of the garage is sheeted. I'm putting up shelves. I'm stuffing quarts of paint up on these shelves. And as I'm stuffing quarts of paint, one of the quarts gets away and it's falling towards the floor and I don't see it till it's about 2 inches above the top of my foot that's just wearing flip-flops. You know where all the small bones are in your foot? And this full quart of paint lands on top of my foot. Bam! And I make a noise that sounds like this. Oh! And I look over at my wife and my wife's eyes are like this big. And I said this, you can't imagine how bad this hurts. This is like pain you can taste. And we laughed and we laughed and we laughed. And I didn't realize God was going to give me a chance to demonstrate my new way of living with my anger that quickly. But the truth is, I had never tried with God's help. And I thought to myself, if I'm this wrong about that, what else am I wrong about? Everything. 3 years ago, my wife came up to me and she said this. She said, I don't want to start anything, but when your wife says, I don't want to start anything, but they're about to start something, just so you know. And she asked me a question. She said, and we're married at that time, 21 years. And she says, do you ever plan on making the bed in the morning? Now, men have been asked that question in the history of marriage. And I think I gave the dumbest answer in the history of marriage because I didn't think. And I just answered it honestly. I said, I thought you liked making the bed. And she said, nobody likes making the bed. And this is how fast you can do a spot check inventory. This is how fast the 10th step can work in your life if you're spiritually fit. This is what I said. Would you like me to make the bed? And she said, that would be great. I said, consider it done. And you can ask my wife the next time you see her, if I'm at home, that bed gets made by me for the last 3 years plus. And it's not that big a deal. It's an adjustment about this big. You see, one of the things about the 10th step that I want to just touch on before I move on to the 11th step is this is in the 5th step. There's a spiritual direction, a spiritual law. And it's listed as one of the reasons that we think it's important that you do a 5th step. When there's spiritual law or direction in the big book, we have to break down the walls that we think only mean that that can only apply to that step. It's just spiritual direction. It applies to our life, not just the step. And what it says in the 5th step is it says, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. The problem is when I try to figure out my life by myself, that's a form of self-centeredness. And I will miss what the information that's really there. Through the 10-step, years and years of 10-step work, I have a pretty good marriage today. At some point, I figured out marriage used to be very confusing to me. The mystery of it. What does she want? What is she thinking? My God, how do you make her happy? And I would talk to other men about it. It's dumb. I would pray about it. But all these things I did in a solitary self-appraisal of how I was doing in my marriage, never realizing that all the answers to all the mysteries were contained in somebody sleeping peacefully next to the same bed every night. And I never thought to ask. I think it's imperative with the 10-step that we involve the other people. You know, when we go into the 9-step, we talk about inventory as though it's a, you know, and it is. It's a process of discovery. And discovery means new information, something we didn't know before. But I think that there is as much discovery contained in the 9th step as there is in steps 4 and 5. Absolutely, if we do it right. If we create an environment where people feel safe to tell us the truth about how our behavior affected them, we will find out more and garner more humility about our footprint, our impact in our relationships in the world in general. And I think it's so important in our 10-step work that when we go and make those amends, remember, it's also a process of discovery. We have to learn to get over our embarrassment and get over our pride when we go to people and ask them the truth. How does this affect you? How did that make you feel when I did that? And get their idea on it. Because I already have my idea. I mean, look, when I do something wrong and I hurt one of God's kids, I instantaneously know how bad I hurt you, how mad you should be, how long it should take for you to get over it, and what it should take for you to get over it. And I'm always wrong. Always. I always minimize it. So I have to remember that that solitary self-appraisal is insufficient in my 10th step, which is why I'm discussing it with somebody else. But I have to involve the people when there's an amends to be made. And I have to go ahead and do that and ask those questions. If I really want to change, if I really want to change. So the 10th step for me is a daily thing. And when do you do a 10th step? What's the trigger for a 10th step? I don't know. Conflict. Conflict where? Not outside of myself, inside of myself. And the reason I mention that is that changes for me. I mean, Clancy said something 30 years ago I thought was brilliant. He said, sometimes I get off work and I get on the Los Angeles freeways and there's traffic jams. And some days I go, there's a traffic jam. That happens. I live in a big city and I just turn up the radio and I relax and I drive home. No big deal. And sometimes I get in the car and there's a traffic jam and I go, traffic jam. Who are these people? Where do they learn to drive? Where do they come from? He goes, as if there's different types of traffic jams. It's not the thing. It's my reaction to the thing. The conflict is always located inside me, not outside of me. Because something that doesn't bother me one day could trigger me the next day. That trigger, anger, self-pity, resentment, fear, any of these things, these self-propulsion systems of self where we're driven by 100 forms of fear, self-seeking, self-delusion, and self-pity, when I find myself, that's a good time for a 10 step. I think one of the worst things we can do with the 10 step is think that it has business hours, right? You know, I'm only going to do it at night. I'm only going to do it after work. You could stop and pull back, but it's practice, practice, practice. And as we practice, the idea with the steps, which are principles, laws of conduct, spiritual in nature, is they become a working part of us. You know, we take the steps until the steps just become what we do. It's our approach to life, but it takes practice. And so you can do it on the fly. You can watch yourself in real time having an experience. And the wonderful thing about that is we can take one of the biggest spiritual tools that we have. In the book, they say restraint of pen and tongue. We'll just make it simple. It's called restraint. Restraint saves us from ourselves, but that's not a tool in itself. We use restraint to get to God, to buy us time. That's the pause that we're going to talk about in the 11th step. So page 85 starts on the bottom. Step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. We shouldn't be shy in this matter of prayer. Better men than us are using it constantly. It works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. It'd be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. And then it starts off, when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. And then we're going to ask ourselves a series of questions. What is the purpose of inventory at night, or what they call the nightly review? What is the purpose in the 11th step? It's taking your temperature spiritually. It's seeing where you were at that day. And really, we're using all these questions to answer only one question. But we surround that question. You know, do I owe an apology? Have I kept something to myself that should be discussed with somebody? Was I thinking myself most of the time, or was thinking of others? Was I kind and loving towards all? All these questions are surrounding the one question. How was my conscious contact today? Because the answer to that question over a protracted period of time is probably going to decide whether or not I stay sober. It's a very important question. If you've come to the understanding or the personal belief that your very life as a recovering alcoholic is dependent upon your relationship with this power we talk about, if you've come to believe that, then anything that tampers with that, interferes with that, blocks that, can be labeled infinitely grave. So it's an important question. And the fact that I think the most important question an AA member can ask themselves is, what's the status of my relationship with this higher power? How am I doing with that? And how much we ignore it is troubling to me. Because I think if you can answer that question on a regular basis, even if you answer it to the fact that I really don't have one today, I haven't prayed in a while, I'm not meditating, I spend all day, every day thinking about me. It's like a bizarre radio station, K-Don, playing all your Don hits all the time. All I have is me in my head. If you're asking the question, you have a chance to make adjustments. You have a chance to get some humility. You have a chance to go to God and ask for his help. If I don't ask the question, I'm alone in the wilderness. So at night, when I retire at night, I ask myself these questions. I have a little piece of paper next to me, and if something's there that I need to write down that I bring into my morning meditation, I will do so. If there's something I feel like I've missed the boat on, I owe an amends. It's funny when you do this review, how many things will pop up. How do I do it? I do it by closing my eyes, and I run my day like a movie. I try to remember from the time I woke up, and I visualize myself going through my day, everything. And it takes about 10 minutes. And every now and then, I will literally, it's so funny, like a spotlight hits it. I will see myself walking by somebody at work who said, "Hey, Don, nice to see you." And I went, "Hey, good to see you too, buddy," and never made eye contact with them. I might write myself a little note there. I might owe an amends. Not a big amends, but maybe the next day when I see that coworker, I'll go, "You know, you were nice enough to say good morning to me. And I just walked right by. I didn't even look at you. I had something on my mind. It's no excuse. I want to thank you for saying hi yesterday." That doesn't just change my life. That changes somebody else's life. We start to slow down enough to see ourselves living. I got to tell you, when I started slowing down enough to watch myself living, I was not impressed. That's just the truth. I realized what a state of selfishness I moved through the world in, how much I was missing. How do you know you had a really selfish day? This is what your 11-step review sounds like at night. You're thinking and you're going, there must have been other people. There must have been other people. There's so many people. Why can't I remember anybody else? And I've had days like that, man. I moved through my day and the only person I can remember was me. That's a self-centered day. Now, I want to tell you one of the things. I think that the 11-step review is probably the least utilized tool in all of our Alcoholics Anonymous. In our quiver of tools, I think it's the most underutilized. I think everybody says they do it, not many do. It's the right answer thing. Yeah, your sponsor goes, "You do an 11-step review?" Absolutely. And we can kind of make it up on the fly, make it sound like we are, because we mean to. We have good intentions. But I think a lot of us aren't doing it. But I'm going to offer the reason I wasn't doing it for many years. When I say I wasn't doing it, not doing it never, not consistently. You see, when I say I do it today, that means that I'm doing it consistently. What's consistent for me? 5 out of 7. If you're 5 out of 7 with your nightly review, you're in the top 3% in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm just telling you. I've talked to enough men honestly about this. Here was my problem, and it's so simple. See if this rings true with you. It's the first thing that it says. When we retire at night. Now, I know what it says in the book. I just told you. Do you know what it sounds like in my head? Right before I go to bed. Now, it doesn't say that in the book. It doesn't say right before I go to bed, I constructively review my day. But when was I trying to do an 11-step review? I don't know. It's about 11:30 at night. I got to get up at 6. I'm on the couch. I'm watching something that I will not remember 5 minutes after I turn the TV off. My eyelids are fluttering. I'm so tired. I'm drifting in and out of consciousness. And I think this, whoo, I'm tired. I should probably go to bed. And as I'm walking up the stairs to my bedroom, I think, ah, damn, I didn't do an 11-step review. I should probably do one. And here's my 11-step review. Hey, God, it's Don. Nobody died. I didn't kill anyone. We'll see you in the morning. Good night. That's my 11-step review. And I wonder why my life isn't changing. You know, every now and then I'll have a guy with 20+ years sobriety call me up and he'll say, hey, I'm off the beam. I'm having trouble. Would you be willing to talk to me about it? And I go, yeah, absolutely. And he'll tell me how bad he feels and how out of sorts he feels and disconnected he feels. And I feel like I have no relationship with God. I go, well, let me ask you a few questions. So I'll ask him. I go, how many meetings are you going to? Well, you know, work's been crazy. I'm not getting to as many meetings as I like. How many meetings are you going to? I'm going to 1, maybe 2 a week. Okay, maybe 1. Okay, all right, that's fine. How many commitments do you have in the program? You know, I used to have a lot of commitments. I got to tell you, how many commitments do you currently have? I don't have any. You know, my life's gotten crazy. I'm just afraid to commit to that. I don't know that. Okay, that's fine. How many people are you working with? Well, you know, I've sponsored a lot of guys. How many people are you currently taking through the work in the book? Nobody right now. Okay. What does your prayer and meditation look like? My what? Your prayer meditation. Well, you know, I pray. I pray and, you know, and I think about, okay, stop right there. I figured out your problem. You're not doing anything. There's this thing that I have suffered from at times in my recovery where I think days of recovery stacked upon each other equal some type of solution in the moment. And they don't. I think I can show life my AA resume and I'll be okay. And the reality is, what did I do today? And if I can't answer that, then I didn't work my program today. It's that simple. It's not beating myself up, but I have to stop kidding myself about what I'm doing and not doing if I don't want to get better. So I'm trying to do this 11-step right before I go to bed, and I'm not doing it very well. And one day I'm talking to a buddy of mine, and we have a mutual friend, and he asked me about the mutual friend. And I said, man, he's doing great. I go, he retired about 6 months ago. He can't get the grin off of his face. And he goes, man, I can't wait till I'm done with work. And when he said that, I went, retired means done with work. And I immediately thought about the 11-step. And I said, what if the book said, when we're done with work, we constructively reviewed our day? What would that definition of done with work be? Well, I get up, I go to work for a living, I do all that, then I come home, there's things I have to do. There's usually AA stuff I'm doing all through the day, returning phone calls. Maybe I have a commitment that night, maybe I'm going to a meeting, I'm doing that kind of stuff. But at some point in that equation, right, the work for the day, the stuff that's scheduled is done. I'm fed, the animals are fed, everybody's tucked in. And then I drift into a phase of my day that I affectionately call quality Donnie time, right? And that involves reading what I want to read, watching what I want to watch on TV, listening to what I want with music, going down the YouTube wormhole, whatever it is. I'm about to drift into, you know, that part of the day where you screw the top of your head off and you take your brain out to let it cool down a little bit, that part. What if I did an 11-step then? What if that was before I go into the relaxation mode, which for me is anywhere from 9 to 10 o'clock at night? And I started trying to do that. And man, this is the first thing I discovered. It's a lot easier than when you're half asleep. Because at that point in my day, I'm full of energy. Not only that, my brain has been rolling, right? I'm connected to my day on a much more accurate level. And that's the one suggestion I would make to people that are having trouble being consistent with their review is get rid of this idea that it's the last thing that we do, but it's the first thing we do before we go into that relaxing period. And almost all of us have some time that we set aside at the end of our day to just relax. Do it then and watch what happens. Watch how easy it is. And when I get up in the morning, the directions are very simple. And this is what I love about Bill Wilson and love about the big book. You know, imagine me when, you know, I get sober in 91, the book is released in 39, and I'm reading stuff in the 11th step about the morning. And I'm like, how did they know? How did they know? Because the first thing I'm going to do when I wake up upon awakening is I'm going to go to God and I'm going to pray to get rid of the state that I wake up in every morning of my life. How did Bill know other than he's an alcoholic and he must be a lot like me? Because I wake up every day a little bit blue. Now, I'm not going to say depressed. I think that would be an insult to people that actually have depression. But I do wake up a little bit blue, and definitely blue compared to how I'm going to feel in a couple of minutes. And it used to worry me. You know, I'd wake up, I'm kind of off the, you know, I'm off the beam. I'd wake up like, God, I don't want to go to work. I hate my job. And, you know, everything in my head is negative. I didn't get enough sleep. Why do I stay up so late? I got such a tough day. Not a great way to start your day. And it was weird because I went to bed, I was in a good mood. I wake up a few hours later and I'm just not happy about being alive. And the first thing that I do is I go to God and I pray that my thinking be redirected. It's divorced from these selfish, self-seeking motives. Now, how did Bill know that I wake up like that every day? And I used to worry about it. I used to talk to men about it early in sobriety. Like, what am I doing wrong? And I got all these really great suggestions from AA members like, well, invite God into your sleep. That didn't work. Try to read spiritual literature right before bed. That didn't work. Try to think positive thoughts right before you go to bed. That didn't work. Try not to watch anything violent on TV before you get to bed. That didn't work. None of it worked. And then finally, one guy said to me, he goes, hey, man, our whole lives are about a conscious contact. When you're asleep, you can't have a conscious contact. If there's a higher power, I don't know, maybe there's a lower power. And maybe that's his domain when you're asleep. Because it doesn't matter what happens. And it doesn't matter how you feel when you wake up. What matters is what you do when you wake up. And that rang true with me. So I don't worry about how I feel when I wake up, but I get into action pretty quickly. I'll also say that I've heard a lot of speakers kind of get heavy-handed about this upon awakening. They'll say, notice it says upon awakening, not after you've had 2 cups of coffee, not after you've walked the dog, not after you've done it. It says upon awakening. Okay. I turned 60 this year. I wake up and go to the bathroom. I have a dog. He's a good boy. He goes to the bathroom second, all right? Then I get a cup of coffee. I have trained myself that upon awakening, my first conscious thought in the morning is good morning, God, in my head. First conscious thought. Then I use the bathroom. The dog uses the bathroom. Get a cup of coffee. Takes about 5, 6, 7 minutes, and now I'm awake. And now I can follow the directions in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Bottom of page 86, in thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God for inspiration, intuitive thought, or decision. We relax and take it easy. We do not struggle. We're often surprised how the right answers come after we tried this for a while. All right. Says we conclude this period of meditation that with a prayer that we've been shown throughout the day what our next step is to be. Let me tell you one of the problems I had with meditation for years, and prayer for that matter, is I would have great prayer and meditation. And then I would walk out my front door and it seemed like there was some type of a spiritual guillotine hanging at my front door that would sever my conscious contact. And then I'd go out in the world and I'd run on self-will all day long. And at the end of that, I do a nightly review and go, man, I was with myself all day long and I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. And what it was is I had some old ideas about prayer and meditation. And I don't know if you'll identify with any of these, but here's some of my old ideas. It was about how long you should pray, how long you should meditate, when it should be done, and how you should feel when it's done. All my old ideas were kind of wrapped up in that. And so if I was running late that day and got up late, didn't have time to meditate, I'd say a quick prayer, good morning, God, and I'm in the truck and I think to myself, damn, I didn't pray and meditate this morning. I'll try harder tomorrow. As though God had business hours. As though if I knocked on the door to God, he'd say, you had your shot, you overslept, try again tomorrow. Sorry, Scooter. I don't know where I get this from. I don't get it from the big book. I never got it from a sponsor. And I never had an AA member tell me that. It just comes through my head. When we talk about in chapter 5, we have to get rid of our old ideas. Boy, I didn't realize how many old ideas I had. But really, what is an old idea? It's everything I had when I showed up here. It's the way I thought about life. And so as I've stayed sober, I've discovered more and more of these old ideas, and never were they more apparent than in the way I approach prayer and meditation. You got to remember, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I had no religious background. I've never really prayed. I've never really meditated, yet I have all these opinions about it that I form almost instantaneously by listening to a few people share in a meeting. That's good, that's bad, what works, what doesn't work. Let me tell you, I took all the labels off of it. There's no good prayer and there's no bad prayer. There's no good meditation, there's no bad meditation. There's only a question. Did you do it or not? Did you do it or not? And once I started doing that, it took the pressure off. And some days, I have a lot of time to do it. And some days, it's very brief. But here's what started to change. Because I started to believe that God doesn't have business hours, I said, God, I feel so good. You know, the nice thing about being sober is we do what we do and we get what we get. And because we're sober, we should be conscious to the results. So we can really start to track as individuals what works for me spiritually. It may be different from what works for you spiritually, but we're allowed to ascertain, like, what's working? What did I like about that? What didn't I like about that? And one of the things I noticed is, man, I felt good after prayer and meditation. I felt less fear, less worry about my life, more committed to going forward and adding to the game of life. I liked the way it made me feel. And so I started thinking of the components of good prayer and meditation, the basics, what's really going on? And what was going on is I was pulling away from my life. I was pulling away from self. I was setting apart a little bit of time to connect with God as I understand him, and to start to try in a simple way to ascertain by asking questions, what would God have me do? And visualize myself doing that, what it says, carry a vision of God's will to all my activities. And but I made time for it. And then I was rewarded with this energy, the spiritual energy to go forward. Why am I only doing that in the morning? I couldn't answer it. How would I incorporate that into my day-to-day living? And here's what I do. And I've been doing this better part over 10 years. And I started doing it earlier than that, but I started getting really concrete about it over 10 years ago. It's really simple. And I share it because I've had people try this and come back to me and say, man, that's a simple thing that works. I go to work in the morning, and as I'm driving to work, very often my work life creeps into my consciousness. I start thinking about what I have to do that day. And although I'm driving the speed limit, I start feeling like I'm going faster and faster and faster. I start feeling rushed. I'm not even at work yet, but I start feeling rushed. I start thinking, how fast can I get through this stuff, right? And I'm the kind of guy that if I don't pause, because what the book says is when I'm confused or I'm doubtful, I pause when agitated, I ask for an intuitive thought or idea. I will start to feel that, but I'll ignore it. I'll come up with a story like, yeah, it's just a work day. I'm just worked up about work. And I won't recognize that I'm not following the directions in the 11th step. And I'll walk into my office and I'll tell you, man, I have a position of authority where I work and people wait for me. People need my direction and it's a gift. And they will come at me like fighter jets, Don, Don, Don. And if I'm not spiritually fit, I might say something like, look, man, I just walked in the door. Don't you see the briefcase in my hand? You know what? Why don't you give me 5 minutes to let me get to my desk and get a cup of coffee? Then I'll drop everything and work on your problem. How about that? And for some reason, that hurts people's feelings. So I learned to shut the rig off and don't get out. I found out that God lives in the pause, and his language is silence. So shut the rig off. Don't get out. Say a prayer. God, there's men in this place that need my help, and you've blessed me with this job, and I really like it. Let me put their needs ahead of mine. Let me set my selfishness aside. Show me how you would have me treat them, and give me the strength to do that. And then for about 30 seconds, I just breathe deep, and I see myself being a kind and loving, attentive supervisor. And now I can get out of the rig and I walk in and I can open the door and nothing changes. It's still like, Don, Don, Don. And suddenly it's like, what do you need, guys? Come on over. We're going to have a great day. And I put their needs ahead of mine. It takes about 15 minutes to a half an hour, which I have to give up that time anyway. It's part of my job. But everybody feels important. Everybody feels that their stuff matters, because it does. And I feel better. And it's the same experience that works two different ways, one with God and one without God. When I come home at the end of the day, if I don't stop and pause and pray and meditate, and I walk into my house, my wife's home. And my wife loves me. I'm her favorite person in the world to talk to about stuff. And I know that when I get home, she's going to want to talk to me about what? I don't know. But she always wants to talk to me about something. And if I'm not spiritually fit, I might walk in the door and go, hey, do you mind if I get my boots off? I just got home. And you're just like, blah, 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 blah. Can you give me 5 minutes? 5 minutes, and then I'll just be all yours. Would that be okay? And for some reason, that hurts her feelings. And I've learned to pause and say the little prayer. God, there's a woman in that house, and you put her in my life, and she's a gift, and I love her like good poetry. Get my selfishness out of the way. Let me go in there and put her needs ahead of mine. Let me ask her how she's doing instead of making sure she knows how I'm doing. And I'll tell you, when I do that and I walk in, we get along like kittens. And I go look for my wife wherever she is, the backyard, the kitchen, upstairs. I'll say, hey, baby, how you doing? Tell me about your day. And that little shift in approach has completely changed our home life when I remember to do it. I arrive in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got the world hanging all over me. I go to meetings, and I've been working all day. I'm out there in the real world, man, with a real job, slaying dragons. You know what I mean? And I show up at AA, and if I'm not spiritually fit, I just want to get into my home group. And I'll walk right by the newcomer on my way to the coffee pot, on my way to my favorite chair, on my way to go talk to my friends about, all the crap that I should have left in the parking lot that has no business being in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've learned to not get out of the rig, to shut it down and say a prayer. God, I'm at Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got the world hanging all over me. I got my money problems, my sex problems, my I want to do this problems, I'm going to buy that problems. Let me remember what it was like to be new in AA. Let me remember that there were people who are for me. Get my selfishness out of the way so I can be there for the next guy. And then I meditate on that for a minute. Now I'm ready to go to a meeting. Now I can leave that stuff in the parking lot. And now it's not about getting a cup of coffee. It's about looking in the parking lot and seeing the new guys and walking down there and saying, how you guys doing tonight? And shaking hands and doing the things that I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous that were done for me. It's about going in and working the room and shaking hands with everybody in that room before I get a cup of coffee, before I sit down, before I do that stuff. And then I'm part of the meeting rather than somebody just trying to take from the meeting. This pause that we talk about, I think it's one of the most important spiritual directions in the big book, is the pause. How many things in our life, how many mistakes have we made in recovery that if we think to ourselves afterwards, like, I can't believe I did that. Here we go. If I had just stopped, if I had just taken a minute before I said that or did that, boy, wouldn't that have been great. That's the pause we're talking about. God lives in the pause. Prayer and meditation, I believe, can be used anytime during the day. And what it creates is a gap, a pause, a silence that God can move into and we can move into with God. And it changes our life. And I got a few minutes left to talk about the 12-step. And, that is our program. And it's very funny. If you read the history of Alcoholics Anonymous before they had a big book, before they had meetings on every corner in America, before they had the first step and they had the 12-step. It was a 2-step program, really, in the way they were working it out. You went through the steps very quickly. You stopped drinking, and then you went and you worked with another drunk. And that is what kept these guys sober. When all else fails, intensive work with another alcoholic would save the day. And they were living that promise in the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous because they didn't have anything else. Can you imagine? You're somebody that lives in Arizona in 1940, there's no Alcoholics Anonymous, and you get a hold of the copy of the big book, and all you can do is read it, follow the directions, and then go find another drunk. That was it. No central office, no 90 and 90, no nothing. The simple idea that if I carry the message to the alcoholic that still suffers, this suffering alcoholic has a shot at staying sober. And you see, I'm a product of the 12-step. I'm a guy that walks into Alcoholics Anonymous at age 31, more dead than alive. I'm a guy that on the second night of recovery, coming up on 48 hours without a drink of alcohol, detoxing out of my brains, was leaving AA to go get drunk because I couldn't take the pain of sobriety. And I was 12-stepped in the rooms by two good members of Alcoholics Anonymous that understood why they were at that meeting last night. And these two good men took a 30-foot journey across a clubhouse to cordially welcome me to AA, and it changed my life. And because a man was willing to extend himself and become my sponsor on my second night of sobriety, the second night of my sobriety, because of the 12-step, my life changed forever. And if you ask me today, what are the important things in my recovery? I'd say I got a home group. It's a place I draw a line in the sand, right? Where I make a stand for my life with those guys. I have a sponsor that I'm completely transparent with, that knows everything about me, and I'm not worried about looking good. He knows every little nook and cranny, right? I have commitments in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that tie me to you and ultimately tie me to God. I have a relationship with this power greater than myself that's the most important relationship I have. And those are the things that are so important to me today. But what was I given my second night of recovery? You see, I got an active member as a sponsor, and because of that, he had a home group, which meant I had a home group, right? He had commitments in the program, which meant I had commitments in the program. He had a relationship with God that meant that God worked through him, and I had a relationship with God. He was active in the program, so he had a whole host of friends, which meant suddenly on my second night of recovery, I had a whole host of friends, because I didn't realize when someone sponsors you, you inherit all their friends. I didn't know that. My second night of recovery, I was given the keys to the kingdom. And if you had told me on my second night of recovery, your life just changed forever, you've been given everything you need to stay sober the rest of your life, I'd have missed it. I wouldn't see the value in what had happened, but I see it today. I see the simplicity of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was fortunate because I started sponsoring men at 6 months sober, and I didn't feel up to it. You know, I felt overwhelmed. I felt I didn't know enough. I mean, my God, I'm 6 months sober. I'm living at my sister's house. I'm hopelessly in debt. I'm working construction for minimum wage. I don't have a car. You know, I've just started cleaning up the warrants for my arrest. I mean, if you want what I have and you're willing to go to any length for it, I mean, what do I have to offer somebody? And here's what I found out about sponsorship. Nobody cares about what you got. Anybody that cares about what's in your bank account, what you're driving, where you're living, what you do, if that's what they care about in a sponsor, they ain't here for recovery. What I found out is people that wanted recovery, what they cared about is how did you do it? The first guy I sponsored is still sober today. He's got 6 months less than me. And you know, we're friends to this day. And I remember after he got a year, I said, Donnie, of all the people you could have asked for help, why would you ask me? And he said, well, I heard your story. And he goes, and I figured if a loser like you could get sober, it'd be a snap for me. So you never know what beneficial message you carry to the new man or the new woman. But here's the deal. We have to sponsor. We have to take people through the work. It's the only job in Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything else is activity. Everything that we do, every committee meeting, every arm of the service structure, everything we talk about in our home groups facilitates or should facilitate the one job we have. We do it better than anybody. We carry the message to the alcoholic that still suffers. We do it better than the doctors, the lawyers, and the Indian chiefs. You know what I mean? It's our calling. It's the one thing that we do better than anybody. We may not do everything great, but we are uniquely qualified to carry that message. And so it was important. My sponsor drilled into me. He said, because of your experience, both before Alcoholics Anonymous and the experience you're having now with the steps, you are the guy to carry the messaging. There are no mistakes in God's world. God will put people in your life and you're supposed to help them. And I'd say, but how will I know? How will I know who I'm supposed to help? And he said, oh, Don, God made you. He knows everything there is to know about you. So he knows you're not very smart. So the people you're supposed to help, he's going to put them right in front of you so you can't miss them. And I've never forgotten that. The people I'm supposed to help in Alcoholics Anonymous, I will find standing right in front of me if I'm looking for them. And there's no mistakes in God's world. But I'll admit, there have been a few times over the years where I've had a guy standing in front of me talking, and I'm thinking, this one too, God, this one? And let me tell you, those are the guys you end up falling in love with the deepest. There's no mistakes in God's world. I've run out of time. I want to thank you so much for listening. It's been a blast. I hope we stay sober forever. Thank you.